There's been a ton of hype surrounding the Green Bay Packers defense because of its talent at every position. Many NFL analysts are predicting that the Packers will take a major step forward on defense next season. For years, the Packers struggled to assemble the right pieces around Pro Bowl defensive lineman Kenny Clark, who consistently dominated but rarely got any help. Coming off an incredible performance in the playoffs and what appears to be a strong offseason, there's high hopes surrounding the Green Bay Packers defense. The expectations come from last year's playoff performance against the 49ers, where the Packers defense didn't allow a touchdown and held the 49ers top playmakers Deebo Samuel and George Kittle in check, despite a losing effort. The lingering issues appear to be rectified entering the 2022 season. The Packers' best kept secret this year? The depth and talent overall of the defensive line. Packers general manager Brian Gutekunst used his first-round picks on linebacker Quay Walker and defensive tackle Devontae Wyatt, then re-signed All-Pro inside linebacker Devondre Campbell and playmaking quarterback Rasul Douglas. With Pro Bowler Kenny Clark anchoring a strong defensive line and Rashawn Gary and Devondre Campbell leading the linebackers, they're getting Jair Alexander back from missing most of last season with a shoulder injury. Alexander tops a premier secondary group. Adrian Amos and Darnell Savage are also back in their fourth year. On paper, this looks like a defense without a weakness. So what exactly is going on? Should Packers fans be optimistic? Or is there some secret downward trend in the background, destined to doom Green Bay to yet another season of defensive mediocrity? First and most importantly, defenses are very tough to predict in general. This was a Packers unit that finished 9th in total defense last year, and has finished in the top 10 in total defense in the last 2 seasons. The big thing though, which is obvious to any Packers fan, is the secondary. The team arguably has the best defensive back room in the league. However, corners vary immensely from year to year. But the important takeaway is that under Joe Barry in 2021, the Packers excelled at stopping wide receivers. They may have had good individual players at each level of defense, but they still had their weaknesses, and weaknesses on defense are worse than weaknesses on offense. No one forces the quarterback to target a terrible wide receiver, but a quarterback can target a lousy corner or safety over and over. Most offenses prefer to throw to receivers instead of tight ends or running backs, as wideouts are generally the most efficient offensive weapons on the field. But they like to target bad defenders for obvious reasons. Now if you combine the two, your defense is going to suffer. Last season the Packers made opponents do something they didn't want to do. They were forced to check down and they found their tight ends. And it worked, which is a problem, but it's a problem you can adjust to. And for the Packers, adjusting to it is as simple as having all 3 corners healthy. Green Bay has one of the best cornerback trios in the NFL. Jair Alexander gave up a 68.3 passer rating when targeted in 2020. Eric Stokes allowed a 78.8 passer rating in coverage on 96 targets as a rookie. And Rasul Douglas allowed just a 50.8 reception rate in 2021.
Up here many times, and I don't mean to sound like a broken record, but I'm a firm believer in this league, you can't have enough corners. So it's great. You know, Jair wasn't going anywhere, but, and technically, you know, nothing. I haven't heard, honestly, we have not even talked about it yet because, you know, when it becomes official, it will become official. But I'm just looking forward to getting 23 back on the field and healthy and back to himself.
I should also mention the issue of the Packers' run defense. They finished 28th in the NFL last season. While run defense matters far less than pass defense, it still matters, and even more so if you're awful at it. Now, if you're part of the average run defense club in the NFL, other teams won't hurt you too badly. But the Packers were so bad that opponents did real damage against them. The issue is that they don't put opponents in as many long down and distance situations as their peers. Backs and tight ends tend to average between 8 to 10 yards per reception, and the more 3rd and 4 opportunities you give them because you couldn't stop the run, the more efficient they're going to be. More stuffs on 1st down equals less efficient short yardage receivers on 2nd and 3rd down. Linebacker used to be the team's biggest weakness. Now it fields All-Pro Devondre Campbell and 2022 first-round pick Quay Walker, a 6'5" linebacker with incredible athleticism. On top of all of that, the defensive front features Rashawn Gary, Preston Smith, Dean Lowry, and Kenny Clark, along with fellow 2022 first-round selection, Devontae Wyatt. Kenny Clark's dominance is well established. He's highly regarded around the league because he's a rare player. The league doesn't have very many disruptive nose tackles who can withstand the rigors of interior run defense and collapse the pocket on quarterbacks. Clark can, and he has over many consecutive seasons. Dean Lowry's productivity in 2021 came out of nowhere. A struggling pass rusher for much of his career, Lowry produced a career-high 42 total pressures and 4 batted passes, over 425 pass rushing snaps last season. His combination of length and power are assets, and he played more to his strengths in 2021. Now, the Packers haven't had a quality run stuffer since the days of Ryan Pickett and B.J. Raji, but Wyatt could fill that role immediately. Wyatt's not an enormous tackle, but he may provide more production than serving just as a simple run stuffer in the future. But the great thing about defensive linemen is that run stopping doesn't take much time to learn. Last season at defensive end, the Packers were extremely light next to Clark, and the occasional heavies they did bring in lacked the versatility to stay in on passing downs. When the Packers would go nickel or dime, which was always, they would often be far too light to stop the run. Wyatt and Clark should essentially end that problem, as a pair of two-way defensive linemen capable of at least providing average production against run and pass. Green Bay will now go into the season with at least 5 solid players along the defensive line. The group could set an incredibly strong foundation for a defense that is as good on paper as any in football. NFL executives apparently aren't quite sold on Green Bay's personnel, though. ESPN surveyed more than 50 executives, coaches, scouts, and players to create a top 10 list for each position group. Those lists are short players from Green Bay's defense. At cornerback, Alexander ranked 3rd behind Rams' Jalen Ramsey and Ravens' Marshawn Lattimore. At defensive tackle, Clark ranked 6th. Of course, none of this matters. The executives' opinions don't matter. The outside expectations don't matter. The locker room talk doesn't matter. Excellence is earned on the field. Green Bay's playoff performance added some shine to what had been a finishing stretch that largely stunk. From Week 6 at Chicago through Week 10 against Seattle, the Packers allowed just 11.6 points per game. Things went off the rails from there, only for the defense to deliver a masterpiece against the 49ers to end 2021 and fuel expectations for 2022. Over the final 7 games last season, the Packers allowed 28-plus points 5 times, tied for worst in the NFL. From Game 11 against the Vikings through Game 17 against the Lions, the Packers ranked 28th in points allowed, with 27.3 per game. They were 28th with 4.89 yards allowed per carry. They were 27th with 6.18 yards allowed per play, and tied for last with 16 touchdown passes allowed. The only reason why the Packers went 5-2 is because the offense ranked 2nd with 33.4 points per game. Will the defense be better with Barry due to experience, or worse because opponents will have had the offseason to study their tendencies? Barring an onslaught of injuries, there'll be no excuse for Green Bay's defense to perform so poorly in 2022. Finally, the single biggest driver of defensive success in the NFL is the quality of the offenses they face. It is, of course, completely ridiculous to predict how good NFL teams will be the following season. However, in his first season as defensive coordinator, Joe Barry had the Packers in the top 10 in turnovers force, pass defense, run defense, and points allowed. This was just in 1 year. With the additions of elite defenders from Georgia and a veteran presence along the defensive line, Green Bay's defense, which has allowed an average of 32.9 points per game in its 10 playoff losses with Rodgers as quarterback, appears to be primed for his best season in over a decade. Given the quality of the top 3 corners, along with Rashawn Gary and Kenny Clark's brilliance, Devondre Campbell's rise, Preston Smith's return, and Adrian Amos' steady hand in the back, I think a top 10 finish is pretty likely for this defensive unit. So is the Packers defense overrated?